Hi, I'm Brian Russell. Welcome back to class. I want to use Psalm 15 to illustrate how to do a basic survey of an individual psalm using inductive Bible study principles. Psalm 15 is a great, powerful psalm, and it's also short. So I'm going to read it in the New Revised Standard Version, and I'm going to walk through at least laying out the structural part of the psalm. And if you want to stop the video and practice yourself, you can then turn it back on, and you can hear how I walk through this. But let's hear the psalm first. It's very short, 5 verses. O Lord, who may abide in your tent, who may dwell on your holy hill? Those who walk blamelessly and do what is right, and speak the truth from their heart, who do not slander with their tongue, and do no evil to their friends, nor take up a reproach against their neighbors, in whose eyes the wicked are despised, but who honor those who fear the Lord, who stand by their oath even to their hurt, who do not lend money at interest, and do not take a bribe against the innocent. Those who do these things shall never be moved. Again, a really powerful psalm. Now, when we're looking at a psalm or any text and we want to break it down into its components, what we're looking for are two things to start with. We're making either a chart or an outline that divides the psalm into main units and subunits, and then we're looking for structural laws that help you connect the individual pieces together. And the idea is, when you can see the structure of something, the structure leads us into the mind, heart of the author. Structure leads us to the meanings that the author has embedded into the text. And so when we look at Psalm 15, you may have noticed that verse 1 starts with a couple of questions. Again, and essentially, first half of verse 1 is really repeated in the second half of verse 1. That's a phenomenon called parallelism. Now, parallelism is the way that Hebrew poetry is organized, and you can check out a different video that in my playlist that will explain parallelism. But we just want to notice that essentially verse 1 starts with a question, and then you may have noticed that verses 2 through 5 essentially answer the question. Like, who may dwell in your tent, O Lord? Who may dwell on your holy hill? Well, verses 2 to 5 describes the character and the attributes of people who can dwell with the Lord. And so what you want to notice then is, so if we're going to do a structure and like an outline, verse 1 is clearly the first piece of this psalm and asks a question. And I'll just I'm just going to abbreviate it, but who may abide, dwell with God? Unit 2, and I'm not going to divide the one verse into subunits at that point simply because there's not enough material. Now, if you're going to divide verse 1, you would just divide it into those first half of the verse, second half of the verse. So notice sometimes you don't really have subunits, but it's pretty clear that this is going to stand by itself because the second unit is the answer. And this is verses 2 to 5. And I would suggest there's at least two pieces to the answer. We're going to have A and B, so there's going to be two subunits here. And the first subunits are the specific characteristics, attributes. And this is verses 2, and I'm going to say 5a, and then there's a larger statement that's made in the very last line, which is the second half, or really the last third, if you will, of verse 5, which says, "Those who do these things shall never be moved." And so this is a statement about security, if you will, the security of those who dwell. And so in Inductive Bible Study, we're looking for structures, okay? And so the first structure, it's the most obvious, is this question and answer piece. The author starts with a question, and here in this case, it's a literal 2 questions. And then you have verses that answer it. This is what's known as, in Inductive Bible Study, as problem, solution, or interrogation. So I'm going to write some of these structures down here. And so in other words, the major structure that runs this essentially is problem, solution, question, answer. This is again called interrogation. So problem, solution. I'm just going to make a list of the structures here, or interrogation. And you can clearly see that. That's one of the first structures that shows up. Okay, another structure. And this is important, cueing off this last piece here. Notice what verse 5b does. There's a couple of structures that are here, right? This sort of sums up everything that was said here by talking about those who do these things. Well, what things? The things that are mentioned in verses 2 to 5a shall not be moved. And so what we really have here is a lot of specifics that then moves out to be generalized. And so 5b is a general statement. So he moves from particulars, verses 2, 3, 4, 5a, list a bunch of specific examples. 5b draws out a broad statement. So that's what's known as generalization. So 5b is a general statement. You could also argue that that brings the psalm to a climax as well, because it's not only simply answering the question, but it's then even saying something even more. They won't be moved. So I would suggest that it's generalization and a climax that's there. Again, you can disagree on the climax part, but I think I'm pretty certain that the generalization is there. What's another structure? Another structure that I think's here is also the nature of the way the psalm is structured. It's kind of the opposite of generalization, because in a sense, the question itself can be read as kind of a generalizing question. It's looking for attributes of the person who can dwell. And again, the way it answers is with specifics. And so what I want you to see in the way the psalm is laid out, which makes it so beautiful, is we get a broad question that then leads to specifics. The reason I'm here, this is broad, and then the specifics come down here. So we can also say that this is not only a question and answer, problem, solution, but this would also be called a particularization. And you can mix these things together and say problem, solution. I'm going to add with particularization. Or you can break the particularization into its own component pieces. But this gets you started. Now, to fill out the survey, and though anybody who's listening to this who isn't in one of my classes and you'd like some more information, email me, and I will go ahead and give you out my structure sheets and some of my basic inductive Bible study tools if you're interested. But those of you who are in the class know that then what we do is we take each of these structures, we ask a set of questions, we pick strategic areas, we make a note about the genre of the psalm, the atmosphere of the psalm, and then we take any other notes that would be helpful for us long term. But this is the basics of a survey. And if you want to abbreviate inductive Bible study on your own, just always do at least the breakdown into an outline or a chart, and then look for these structures. Because if you explore the way these structures unpack, and do a deep dive on them, you will have effectively interpreted the psalm, which is then the pathway to make profound applications into our lives so that we can integrate our lives into these scriptures and take the scriptural words and impress them on our hearts, our minds, our very beings, so that we can be better disciples. If you have any questions, reach out. Till next time, live by faith, be known by love, and be a voice of hope to others.